I was a tour guide at Niagara Falls, standing near the precipice where you can feel the mist on your face. A tourist approached me, looking genuinely concerned. She asked, "Excuse me, what time do you all turn the waterfalls off for the night?" I blinked, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. She explained that her hotel room faced the falls, and she was worried the constant roaring sound would keep her awake. I had to gently explain that Niagara Falls is a massive river flowing over a cliff, not a theme park attraction with an off switch. She looked so disappointed, as if we were deliberately being poor hosts. As a park ranger in Yellowstone, I've seen it all, but this one takes the cake. A family had pulled over to watch a massive bison grazing by the road. The father got his toddler out of the car and was actively trying to place the child on the bison's back for a photo. He was shouting at his wife, "Get the camera ready, this will be epic!" I had to sprint over, heart pounding, and physically pull the child away while explaining that this 2,000-pound wild animal could obliterate them in a second. The father had the audacity to get angry at me for ruining the moment and scaring the bison away. I worked at a car rental agency in Maui. A couple came to the counter, all smiles, asking for a map of the islands. The husband said, "We'd like to drive over to the Big Island for dinner tonight. What's the best route?" I paused, looking for any sign they were kidding. They were dead serious. I had to pull up a satellite image and show them that Hawaii is a chain of islands, separated by vast stretches of the Pacific Ocean. The wife looked shocked and asked, "So there are no bridges at all, not even one?" I had to confirm that no, there are no 100-mile-long bridges connecting the islands. While leading a tour group through the Colosseum in Rome, a woman was complaining loudly the entire time. Finally, she stopped and announced to her husband, "This is ridiculous. We paid good money to see this, and it's completely broken. Why don't they just finish building it?" She genuinely believed it was an abandoned construction project, not a nearly 2,000-year-old historical ruin. She then added that it was an eyesore and that they should tear it down and build a nice mall instead. Several Italians in the group looked like they were about to have an aneurysm. I was a wildlife guide in the Australian outback. A tourist from California approached me, very concerned about a kangaroo she had seen hopping nearby. She showed me a pet GPS tracker she had bought online. Her plan was to sneak up on the kangaroo and attach the collar so she could track it down and return it to its owner. It took me a solid 10 minutes to convince her that kangaroos are wild animals. They don't have owners, and that trying to put a collar on one was a fantastic way to get kicked into the next dimension. At the Grand Canyon's South Rim on a scorching July day, a woman fanning herself dramatically asked me where the park's air conditioning controls were. I thought she was making a joke about the heat, so I chuckled. She did not. "No, I'm serious," she said. "It's way too hot out here. You'd think a popular place like this would have some kind of climate control. It's just poor customer service." I was speechless. I eventually just pointed at the sun and told her that was the thermostat, and unfortunately, we had no control over it. I was a tour guide in London, giving a history talk outside Windsor Castle. A man interrupted me to complain about the noise from the planes flying overhead from Heathrow. He then asked with a completely straight face, why on earth would they build a historic castle so close to a major airport? It seems like really poor planning. I had to politely inform him that the castle was constructed around the year 1070 and that the concept of an airplane wouldn't exist for another 830 years. He just shrugged and said, "Still, it's annoying." In a serene ancient temple in Kyoto, Japan, where people were quietly meditating, a tourist was getting visibly agitated. He was waving his phone in the air and loudly complaining to his friend, "The Wi-Fi here is terrible. I can't even upload my selfie." He then tried to flag down a monk to ask if they could reset the router. The sheer lack of awareness was staggering. He seemed to genuinely believe that the 14th century monks who built the temple should have had the foresight to install a robust, high-speed internet network for future tourists. Working at a visitor center in Denali National Park, Alaska, a tourist asked me a question that broke my brain. He wanted to know what month the park staff releases the bears from their cages for the summer. He had this elaborate vision in his head of us keeping all the grizzly bears in a giant holding facility during the winter, and then having a grand release day in the spring. He was genuinely crestfallen to learn that the bears are, and always have been, wild, free, and very much uncaged year-round. A tourist in Scotland was on a tour of Edinburgh Castle and was trying to haggle for a discount on his ticket. His reasoning? Most of it is in ruins, so I shouldn't have to pay full price for a broken castle. After the ticket seller flatly refused, he then asked if he could take a small rock from one of the ancient walls as a souvenir. The seller had to explain that if every one of the 2 million annual visitors took a rock, there would be no castle left. The man grumbled about the strict rules and walked off. I witnessed a tourist in Venice, standing on the edge of a canal, trying to hail a gondola as if it were a New York City taxi. He was waving his arms frantically, whistling loudly and shouting, "Hey, taxi! Over here!" The gondolier, who was serenading his actual passengers, just glided past with a look of profound confusion. The tourist then yelled after him, "What? Is your meter broken or something? I need a ride!" He simply could not grasp that this was a leisurely, pre-booked romantic experience, not an Uber on water. At the cliffs of Moher in Ireland, I had to physically restrain a woman who was leaning precariously over the unguarded edge to get a selfie. When I told her to back away, she got indignant and said, "It's perfectly fine, the wind is blowing inland. If I slip, it will just push me back onto the path." I had to explain that wind doesn't work like a magical safety net, and that she was seconds away from becoming a tragic news story. Her grasp of basic physics was terrifyingly poor. A man on my tour of the Giza Pyramid complex in Egypt was complaining about the sand, constantly. "It's so sandy here," he'd say. "It gets in your shoes." Finally, he asked me, "Don't the staff ever sweep this place?" "It's very messy." I had to explain that we were, in fact, in the Sahara Desert, and that the sand was a natural and unavoidable part of the landscape. He then suggested, completely seriously, that they should build a giant, sand-proof glass dome over the entire site to keep it clean for visitors. I was a waiter in a Parisian cafe, renowned for its fresh pastries. A tourist from America ordered a croissant, took a single bite, and then called me over to his table with a look of disgust. "Excuse me," he said, "this is stale and cold. Can you please go heat it up in the microwave for me?" The French baker, who was within earshot, looked as if he had been physically stabbed. The absolute sacrilege of microwaving a perfect, flaky, buttery croissant was an insult of the highest order. In Iceland, right next to a geothermal hot spring, there are signs in 5 languages with giant skull and crossbone symbols, warning of boiling water. I watched a tourist completely ignore them and start to dip his hand into the bubbling mud. I ran over and screamed for him to stop. He pulled his hand back, annoyed at me, and said, "I was just checking if it was warm enough for a swim. You don't have to yell." "Sir, it's literally boiling volcanic sludge. It would have cooked your hand to the bone in seconds." A tourist in New York City flagged down a mounted police officer in Battery Park. He asked for directions to the Statue of Liberty. The officer pointed directly at the massive, iconic statue, clearly visible across the harbour. The tourist squinted, shook his head and said, "No, not that one. I want to see the real one from the movies." He was thoroughly convinced that the actual world-famous statue was just a smaller replica for tourists and that a bigger, better movie version was hidden somewhere else in the city. As a ski instructor in the Swiss Alps, I had a client show up for his first ever lesson, wearing nothing but denim jeans and a pair of sneakers. I tried to explain that he needed proper waterproof gear, but he waved me off, saying, "Snow is just frozen water. It can't be that cold or wet." He lasted exactly one run down the bunny slope. After falling twice, he was soaked to the bone, shivering uncontrollably, and had to be escorted back to the lodge, defeated by the basic laws of thermodynamics. While guiding a tour on the Great Wall of China, a tourist asked me how long it took to build. I explained that it was built over centuries with the labor of millions of people. He looked thoughtful for a moment and then asked, "Wow, that's a long time. So, did they get weekends and public holidays off?" The sheer absurdity of applying modern labor laws to ancient Chinese dynasties left me completely speechless. I just stared at him until he awkwardly walked away. Working in a gift shop in the Florida Everglades, a woman came in and asked me which aisle had the alligator repellent spray. She was planning on sunbathing by a lake and wanted to make sure the gators didn't bother her or try to steal her towel. She was genuinely shocked and angry when I explained that no such product exists and that her plan was a terrible, life-threatening idea. She accused us of not caring about tourist safety. In Amsterdam, a city famous for its cyclists, I watched a tourist rent a bike and immediately try to ride it down the middle of the tram tracks. He seemed to think they were a special grooved bike lane designed for stability. He caused a tram to screech to a halt, bells clanging, and created a massive traffic jam. When angry locals pulled him off the tracks, he just yelled, "Well, the signs should be clearer for visitors." The signs were perfectly clear. His common sense was not. I was working security at the Tower of London when a tourist approached one of the iconic Beefeater guards, who are famous for standing perfectly still. The tourist asked, "Can I try on your hat for a quick picture?" The guard, a hardened military veteran, didn't even blink. The tourist then poked the guard in the chest and said, "Hello, are you real?" This earned him a very loud, very real, "Step back from the King's Guard," from another officer that made him jump out of his skin. In a bustling market in Peru, I saw a tourist aggressively haggling with an elderly woman over the price of a beautiful hand-woven alpaca blanket. After the artisan refused her lowball offer, the tourist scoffed and said, "Whatever, I can just get this for half the price on Amazon Prime with free shipping." The look of pure exhaustion and sadness on the artisan's face, who had likely spent weeks creating that single piece, was absolutely heartbreaking. A visitor at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida was looking at the giant Saturn V rocket on display. He then went to the information desk and asked what time the next moon tour was. The staff member, confused, asked what he meant. He replied, "Well, the tour of the facility. Does it include a quick trip to the moon and back?" I assumed that was part of the ticket price. He was genuinely disappointed to learn that the rockets were historical artifacts, not functioning lunar taxis. As a hotel manager in Rome, I got a frantic call from a guest complaining that his bathroom was flooding. He said his special little sink for washing your feet was broken and spraying water everywhere. I went up to his room to find that he had turned the bidet on full blast, aiming it at the ceiling. He had no idea what a bidet was and was wondering why the foot sink had such aggressive water pressure and poor aim. On a whale-watching tour off the coast of California, a tourist opened a bag of potato chips and started throwing them into the ocean. The captain got on the loudspeaker and told him to stop immediately. The man yelled back, "I'm just feeding the whales. They're probably hungry." The captain had to patiently explain over the intercom that 40-ton humpback whales subsist on krill and small fish, not on greasy, salted potato snacks, and that he was just polluting the ocean. In Florence's Accademia Gallery, a tourist was staring at Michelangelo's statue of David, After a few minutes, he turned to the museum guard and asked, "So, is this the original, or is it just a replica?" The guard, with the patience of a saint, replied, "Sir, this is arguably the most famous statue in the entire world." "Yes, it is the original." The tourist just nodded and said, "Huh, he's smaller than I imagined." The guard just closed his eyes and sighed. I was a bartender in a historic pub in Dublin. An American tourist ordered a pint of Guinness. And as I placed the perfectly settled pint in front of him, he asked, "Can I get a straw with that?" I politely explained that a straw would ruin the creamy head, and that's not how it's drunk. He got defensive, saying, "I don't want to get a foam moustache." He then proceeded to stir the entire pint with his finger, turning the beautiful black and white masterpiece into a murky brown mess. While guiding a tour through the excavated ruins of Pompeii, a woman raised her hand and asked, "This is all very interesting, but where are all the people?" I thought she meant other tourists, but she clarified, "No, the residents." I thought this was supposed to be a preserved city. It feels a bit empty. I had to gently remind her that the residents she was looking for had been tragically incinerated and buried under volcanic ash in 79 AD. A heavy silence fell over the group. At Sequoia National Park, a ranger had to confront a man who was using a pocket knife to carve Josh plus AME into the bark of the General Sherman tree, one of the largest and oldest living things on Earth. When the ranger told him to stop destroying federal property, the man argued, "I'm not destroying it. I'm just making my mark, becoming a part of history." The ranger calmly replied, "Sir, the only history you're about to become a part of is our list of prosecuted felons."